Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons, and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. All right, guys. Welcome to the podcast. This is the Jade Teta podcast. Here I focus on mind, muscle, and metabolism, and I'm kicking this off with in-depth episodes on metabolism. That's what we're going to be talking about first, because that's everyone's interest. It's the beginning of the year, and everyone's wanting to know how they can get and keep weight off of their body, and therefore I'm going to tackle metabolism in a very big way. And right off the bat, I'll just say, if you hear any squeaking, part of what is going on there is I have a little desk elliptical called a QB, actually, that I use while I am talking, and sometimes it'll squeak a little bit, and that's what you're hearing. So I'm just killing 2 birds with 1 stone here, taking a little bit of my own medicine and making sure I move a little bit as well. So anyway, I'm super excited that you're here, and really excited to get back to talking the basics about metabolism. I've been away from it for a little while. And so let's just kick it off and not waste any time. I really want these episodes to be very hard-hitting and quick for you. So here's the issue. When it comes to weight loss, right, there are 2 things that are required for weight loss. And more specifically, we're talking about fat loss, right? The 2 things that are required: a calorie deficit that is absolutely required, and the thing that not a lot of people know is we need metabolic hormonal balance. Why do we need that? Because we need things like our hunger and our energy and our cravings and our sleep and our mood and all of these things to be stable and balanced so that we can maintain that calorie deficit. And this is where everyone goes wrong, because the interesting thing is that trying to create a calorie deficit without attending to the hormonal situation results in hunger, cravings, unpredictable, unstable energy. In other words, what you're doing to try to get the weight off is making it almost impossible to keep that weight off, right? And that's why the statistics essentially look like this. People who lose the weight and keep it off, long-term success with fat loss is less than 5%, and maybe even less. And that's defined as being able to lose 10% of your body weight and maintain it over the course of a year. So what happens is only 5% of those people are able to maintain any weight loss. And over 2/3, based on studies, regain the weight and actually end up fatter. And this is what we are up against. But why? Why is this? It's partly because people don't understand that there are 2 things required. Calorie deficits, yes, of course we need calorie deficits, but we also need hormonal balance, right? And this really is where I want to start this discussion, because if you look at metabolism the way it's typically talked about, there are 2 camps, right? There's the calories are all that matters camp. Calories in, calories out. Metabolism is a calculator. That's the way they see it. This predictable, stable, punch in the numbers and you get the result. And then there's the hormones are everything, people. Insulin and leptin and all these hormones and thyroid hormone are what really matters. And the truth of the matter is that when you look at the totality of the research, it is really both matter. And when you look at clinical practice, which is actually most important, yes, I'm a research junkie, but mostly I let research refine my approach rather than define my approach. And that's because I've seen a lot of people in clinical practice. And what I've noticed is the personal trainers out there, the gurus who write the books and the blogosphere and all of that stuff, they oftentimes have a good theoretical knowledge. They know the research, but they haven't worked with enough people to really see these things in practice. And I can tell you real quick, spend 1 week or 2 weeks in a weight loss clinic, and you will see really quickly the futility of prescribing diets just based on calories and macros and things of that nature. And so that is what we're up against here. So yes, you need calorie deficits and you need hormonal balance. The metabolism is not a calculator, but the metabolism is also not a chemistry set. This idea that there's this perfect ratio of hormones, this magic combination of insulin and glucagon and thyroid and leptin and all these hormones that will bring you to fat loss Shangri-La is also wrong. Simplistic models can be useful because they can get us going in the right direction, but they also can fall flat, as we've seen with the calorie model and the hormone model, and leave a lot to be desired because it's not black and white, there's gray, right? And so if we're going to use a simplistic model to describe the metabolism, probably the best model to use is going to be that of a thermostat or a seesaw or a pendulum or a yo-yo, or a boomerang. In other words, anytime you try to push on the metabolism to make it do what you want, i.e. lose fat, if you stress out your metabolism too much and cause it to be unbalanced, it will push back against you, and you cannot win a battle of wills against your physiology. That is impossible to do. You will always lose. The research shows that the case. My clinical experience shows that that is the case. And so this thermostat model of the metabolism is most important to understand. What we want to be doing is we want to be achieving both that calorie deficit and that hormonal metabolic balance. And what I would say is that you really want to create that hormonal balance first. And why would I say that? Well, the reason why is because if you are hungry all the time, if you have cravings all the time, if you have unpredictable and unstable energy, if your mood is all over the place, you are going to seek out food primarily, and you're going to be less motivated to exercise. And so the smart approach in my mind is to stabilize hunger, energy, cravings, sleep, mood, and all the rest first. And if you want to know how to conceptualize this, I use a little acronym I call SHMEC, S-H-M-E-C, sleep, hunger, mood, energy, and cravings. Or you can shorten that to HEC, hunger, energy, and cravings. SHMEC and HEC need to be in check, and when they are, you know that your metabolism is relatively balanced and stable, and any calorie deficit you do create can be sustained over the longer time frame. That is important. Now, HEC and SHMEC, right? These are biofeedback signals: sleep, hunger, mood, energy, and cravings. And really, there's more than that. There's exercise performance and exercise recovery, libido, sexual performance, digestive function, and of course, signs and symptoms related to the immune system, headaches and colds and flus and joint aches and pains and all these things. So all of these sort of biofeedback that you feel and sense in your body are useful to tell you whether your metabolism is balanced or not. And so that's what we are going after here when it comes to metabolism. Now, the first law of metabolism is to remember what I call the law of metabolic compensation. What that essentially says is that this thermostat nature of the metabolism, if you try to crank it up too high, if you try to speed up the metabolism will do what? Down regulate. That's what the metabolism does. This is also why, by the way, when you expose yourself to things like cold therapies or certain drugs that speed up your metabolism and things like that, guess what else is sped up? Your hunger. And oftentimes, when we try to speed up the metabolism, we also speed up our hunger and we overcompensate. And exercise can do this too because it is a metabolic stimulator, a metabolic mover. Now, is this the case for all people? No, it's not the case for all people, but it is the case for most, especially those coming off the couch. And so The thing to remember is that when you try to speed up your metabolism, when you try to move it, you are always potentially also moving these biofeedback sensations and causing problems. So a lot of people don't understand that maybe their 2-hour a day habit of being on the treadmill is the cause of their 2-hour binge eating session later that evening. And most people don't make this association, but it is absolutely true. So the first thing that you want to be doing is getting schmeck and heck in check. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's going to be different for different people, but there are some general rules. How do you keep the metabolism from pushing back against you? Well, what you want to do is you want to eat in a way that creates maximum hunger suppression and craving reduction.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Okay, let's take a brief break. I want to tell you about a product that I was heavily involved in that is now available for you. And this is Metabolic Super Protein. Up until this point, people who bought my programs, Metabolic Renewal, Metabolic Aftershock, Metabolic Prime, they were the only individuals who can get Metabolic Super Protein, the protein that we designed when I was with Metabolic.com. Now, I'm no longer with Metabolic.com. However, this is the best protein, in my opinion, on the market. And so despite the fact that I'm no longer with Metabolic.com, I still think this is the best protein for you to use. It's the best tasting. It's a mix of collagen and whey protein. It is very easy on the gut. We did everything when I was at Metabolic to make this the best protein available on the market. And Metabolic Super Protein is now available for all of you. And I still have a special deal for you based on my involvement with Metabolic.com in the past. And so you can get a special deal on your first try of Metabolic Super Protein. This is the protein I use every day. I actually use it in my coffee, make a nice coffee protein latte. I've been doing that for the last several months, and I'm absolutely loving it. But I also add it to a lot of other things, including taking it whenever I am having cravings. I especially like to use it at the end of the day when I've had my dinner and I'm needing a taste of something else, and I just want to shut off those cravings and that hunger that are the thing that keeps me from getting results, because I can be a big eater at night if I'm not careful. Metabolic Super Protein is the protein that you want to use. If there was one thing that I could tell you to do diet-wise to help you lose fat, maintain muscle, and regain your health and optimize your metabolism, it would be increasing your protein intake. It is the best thing that you can do. Definitely try Metabolic Super Protein. You will not be disappointed, I promise you. To get Metabolic Super Protein, go to drjade.com/protein deal. drjade.com/protein deal. And you will get a deal on Metabolic Super Protein, and you can try it. I am convinced this is going to be your best and most favorite protein you have ever tried. drjade.com/protein deal. And let's get back to the show.
And energy stabilization with minimal amount of calories. And so we have foods that can balance blood sugar, can suppress hunger and cravings, and are digested very slowly and have minimal amounts of calories. These tend to be foods rich in water, foods rich in protein, and foods rich in fiber that are also lower in starch and fat. So these are going to be foods like all green leafy vegetables and things like that. These are going to be things like low sugar but high water fruits, things like berries, apples, pears, citrus, that kind of thing. And these are going to be lean meats, things like chicken breast, boneless, skinless chicken, egg whites, lean cuts of meat, white fish, all of these kinds of things. Now, I'm not present talking about things from a health benefit, because yes, fats are important, and yes, starch is important as well. But we want protein, fiber, and water with low starch and low fat to start, so we can have hunger suppression, craving reduction, energy stabilization with minimal calories. So to keep this simple in your head, just think soups, salads, scrambles, and shakes. Soups, egg scrambles, salads, and protein shakes. Eat 90% of your meals in the form of soups, salads, scrambles, egg scrambles, and protein shakes, and you will have hunger suppression, craving reduction, balanced, stable energy levels with minimal calories. And then, based on your individual nature, which is another law of metabolism, the law of individuality, you can add in enough, but not too much, of starch, fat, sugar, salt, alcohol to make your diet enjoyable. Now, obviously, this podcast is going to get in depth in future sessions about how to do all of these things. But this is the baseline. I wanted to give you a starting point right off the bat. Protein shakes, egg scrambles, salads, and soups. Now, these are going to be salads, soups, scrambles, and shakes that are lower in starch and sugar and lower in fat as a baseline, okay? And then you can add in the higher calorie, more palatable, hedonistic types of elements to your diet. Now, why do I call this palatable, hedonistic elements of the diet? Well, fat, sugar, starch, salt, alcohol are very flavorful ingredients. They help us. They make our brain happy. And what we've been shown in studies over many, many years is that when you eat a very bland diet, you reduce some of these pleasure centers in the brain and reduce binge eating behavior. You will naturally eat less when the diet is more bland in nature. If you stimulate your taste receptors with lots of hedonistic, highly palatable, creamy, sugary types of textures and things like that, the brain gets very happy and wants more, and you will begin to overeat. And so by sticking with fiber, protein, and water-based foods that are lower in sugar, fat, salt, alcohol, those kinds of things, you can have a very bland diet as well, and then add just enough of the flavor to make your life enjoyable and to make food good, but not so much that you trigger overeating. And in this way, you end up keeping heck and schmeck in check, which balances the hormonal metabolism and allows you to create a natural calorie deficit. This is what you want to be thinking about. Now, that's going to vary from person to person as it pertains to the metabolism. And I'll say a couple things here because a lot of people will be like, well, Jade, what are the elements of these soups, salads, egg scrambles, and shakes? Well, let's go through an example of what this might look at. Let's take soups, for example. We don't want potato soups and creamy soups and things like that. We want vegetable broths and chicken broths and things like that. We don't want noodle soups. We want it loaded with a lot of vegetables and a lot of low-calorie, flavorful broths, right? So this would be like chicken broth, vegetable broth, and lots of vegetables in that soup. Not a lot of rice in that soup, not noodles in that soup, not cream-based soups, those kinds of things. Maybe some tomato soup, a light tomato soup or a light marinara sauce would be useful here as well. What about the salads? Well, salads are easy because salads really are just anything that is primarily vegetable-based. Remember, not starchy vegetables, but vegetables, green leafy type things like kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, asparagus, all romaine, arugula, butter lettuce, all of these kinds of things, spinach, all of those kinds of things with some protein source on there. Or if you're a vegetarian or vegan, skip the meat or that kind of thing and just go extra vegetables. By the way, vegans and vegetarians who are listening to this, part of the reason you all will get in trouble is because you're not actually vegans and vegetarians. You're actually starchitarians and starchins. You eat a lot of starch more than you're eating the vegetables. And so simply up your fiber intake and your water intake, even if you're not getting the meat-based proteins, and you'll do very well with this as well. So a salad can be made anywhere, right? You can go to a burger joint, basically, and get a chicken breast sandwich, strip off the bun, ask for extra lettuce, tomato, onion, and all that kind of stuff, and you have a salad. You can go to a Mexican place. You can order fajitas with extra peppers and onions and chicken breasts and tell them to leave off the rice and the beans and the tortilla, and you have a salad. You can go to an Asian place, get vegetable stir fry with chicken, leave off the rice, and you have a salad. And of course, you can do the traditional salad of greens and that kind of stuff with dressings on top. What kind of dressings? Remember, probably want to stick with vinegars and light oil dressings versus these creamy dressings. Now, what about scrambles? These will be things like frittatas and things like that. Scrambled eggs, throw some spinach in there, throw some tomato in there, throw some onion in there, throw your vegetables in there. Try to reduce the starch intake. Throw some, cheeses in there as well, especially the cheeses that are going to be a little bit lower fat and higher protein. So now you have protein and fiber in those eggs. If you want to take this to the extreme, which you don't need to, you can take out some of the yolks in that. Now, again, I'm not talking about from a health benefit because yolks are one of the healthiest foods on the planet. I'm just talking about from a hunger suppression point of view. Some of you will want to include the yolks. I include the yolks. So don't get mixed up in this discussion of being like, well, what about the health benefits? We'll get to that later. I'm just giving you the general trends. You want protein, fiber, and water. What about protein shakes? Well, protein shakes come in many shapes and sizes. Meal replacement shakes have a lot of starch in them, so you want to make sure that your protein shake is mostly protein and fiber. Here's one quick way to do that. Take the total carbohydrates of that protein shake and then compare that to the protein plus the fiber. The protein plus fiber in a protein shake should be very close to, within 10 and preferably more than the starch in that protein shake. So you really want more protein and fiber than carbohydrate in your protein shakes. 90% of your meals in the form of soup, salads, shakes, and scrambles, and then enough but not too much of the fat and starch and those kind of things. Now, just as an aside, very quickly, and I won't get into it too much because I don't want to go too long on these podcasts, is that what about all the stuff you've heard about keto diets and high-fat, low-carb diets and those kinds of things? We'll get into that stuff, but there is a benefit to potentially taking out all fat and going very high vegetable-based, sort of the Dean Ornish approach, sort of vegetarian and vegan. They do very well. There's also a benefit to going very low carbohydrate and very high fat and the keto-based approach. Both of these approaches can work. What you'll notice about both of these approaches is they do avoid the major palatable hedonistic combination of sugar, starch, and fat combinations and focus on one or the other. The other thing about the keto diet, it's a very savory diet, right? There's one flavor. So from that perspective, it's not very enhanced flavorful wise. So it will shut down some of the brain hunger. Same thing on the other side, a little less flavorful that when you combine, compared to when you combine, carbohydrates, fat, salt, sugar, alcohol, all of that kind of thing. So these are the general principles that you want to be thinking about. We'll get into further. But just as a review really quickly, remember, the metabolism is like a thermostat. You push against it, it will push back against you. You stress it out, it will stress you out. How do you know your metabolism is not balanced? How do you know that your hormones are not working for you? You know because hunger, energy, craving, sleep, mood, exercise performance, exercise recovery, libido, menstrual regularity, signs and symptoms, immune function, digestive function will all be out of check. Schmeck and heck will be out of check, which means any calorie deficit that you create in the short run will be a calorie excess in the long run. And so you want to make sure you get your heck, schmeck in check first. Balance those hormones with these soups, salads, scrambles and shakes, protein, fiber, and water-rich foods. Then make your food enjoyable with just enough but not too much fat, sugar, salt, and alcohol and those kinds of things, starch and alcohol. That is very important to do. And then you can maintain that calorie deficit over the long run and have the energy and motivation to work out. This is where you want to start. Now, we've talked today about the idea of metabolic compensation. The metabolism will push back against you. And I also mentioned another key metabolic law, the law of metabolic individuality. We'll talk more about these laws and some other metabolism frameworks at the next show. But here is the thing that I want you to focus on as we get started in the new year. Protein, fiber, water, soup, salad, scrambles, and shakes. Almost say it like a song. Soup, salad, scrambles, and shakes. Soup, salad, scrambles, and shakes. That's what you want to focus on. Then you want to add enough, but not too much, according to your individual preferences and psychology of starch, sugar, salt, fat, and alcohol to make your meals enjoyable. How will you know that you are doing it right? Your heck and schmeck will be in check, and that will tell you that your hormones are balanced, and you'll begin losing weight, primarily fat, hopefully, which means your inches are going to be reducing. Remember, it's all about inches. We'll talk about that in a later episode. But if you're losing fat, if you're losing inches, if you're losing weight, then you know you've got a nice sustained calorie deficit. So hopefully that's really helpful for you guys to get started with this. That's what you want to focus on. That's what's going to get you the results as you move forward. And in future shows, we'll teach you how to tailor this and tweak it and sleuth, because what you'll find is that you really want to stop being a dieter and begin to be a metabolic detective. And in these first few episodes of the Jade Teta podcast, we are going to teach you exactly how to do that. All right, guys, thanks so much for being at the podcast today. I'm trying to make these short, sweet, hard-hitting podcasts for you, and I will see you at the next episode.
You have been listening to the Next Level Human podcast with Dr. Jade Teta. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and consider leaving a review. You make the biggest difference when you pass on your lessons and inspire others. That's why reviews like this are so powerful. Your words may be the only ones that resonate for someone else. Please remember the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult your personal physician or therapist before making any lifestyle changes. And finally, thank you for who you are in the world and the difference you make.